Chapter 1. The transaction. Thrain had turned the courtyard into a mirror of mud and broken stone. Elena stood beneath the eaves of her family's crumbling estate, watching her brothers argue with the stranger as if she weren't there at all, she supposed. In their minds she wasn't. The debt's been paid, Marcus said, his voice sharp with desperation. He was the eldest, the one who'd gambled away their father's land piece by piece until nothing remained but this hollow shell of a house and the shame that clung to the family name like rot. We've given you what you asked for. The stranger didn't move. He stood in the center of the courtyard, rain sliding off his dark coat as if it didn't dare touch him. His face was obscured by shadow and the high collar of his cloak, but Elena could feel his attention on her like a physical weight. You misunderstand, the stranger said. His voice was low, cultured, and utterly devoid of warmth. I didn't ask for payment. I made an offer. Your sister in exchange for your family's survival. Her younger brother, Thomas, shifted uncomfortably. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He'd been the one to tell her, just an hour ago, his voice breaking with what might have been guilt or fear. There's a man. He's willing to settle everything. The debts, the creditors, all of it. But he wants you. Elena had asked. Why? Thomas hadn't known. She's not livestock, Marcus tried, though his protest sounded hollow even to him. She's our sister. We can't just. You already have. The stranger's tone didn't rise, but something in it silenced Marcus instantly. The contract was signed 3 days ago. I've been patient enough to allow you time to inform her. That courtesy has now expired. Elena's hands tightened on the stone pillar beside her. Her brothers had sold her, bartered her away like furniture to a man they didn't know, for reasons they couldn't explain. She should have been surprised. She should have felt betrayal sharp enough to cut. Instead, she felt only a dull, familiar ache. This was what her life had always been, a series of decisions made by men who saw her as a burden to be managed, a problem to be solved. I'll go, she heard herself say. The stranger's head turned toward her. For the first time, she caught a glimpse of his face, pale, severe, with dark eyes that seemed to see too much. He looked young, perhaps 30, but there was something ancient in the way he held himself, something that made her skin prickle with instinctive warning. Elena, you don't have to. Thomas started. Yes, I do. She stepped out from beneath the eaves, rain immediately soaking through her thin shawl. You've made that clear. She walked toward the stranger, her shoes sinking into the mud with each step. She didn't look back at her brothers. There was no point. They'd already chosen survival over her. When she reached him, the stranger extended a gloved hand. She stared at it for a long moment before placing her own hand in his. His grip was firm, careful, and cold even through the leather. You're afraid? He observed quietly. I'd be a fool not to be. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or approval. You're more perceptive than they gave you credit for. They didn't give me credit for anything. Elena met his gaze directly, refusing to flinch away from whatever she saw there. Are you going to tell me what this is about? What you want from me? In time, he released her hand and turned toward the iron gates at the far end of the courtyard. For now, you need only know that you'll be safe under my protection. No harm will come to you in my house. His house. Not our house. Not even a pretense of partnership. A carriage waited beyond the gates, black and windowless, pulled by horses so dark they seemed to absorb the rain's meager light. The stranger opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Elena climbed inside, her wet dress clinging to her legs. The interior was lined with deep burgundy velvet, and the air smelled of old wood and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. She settled onto the bench as the stranger took the seat across from her. The carriage lurched into motion. Through the small window, she watched her family's estate disappear into the rain and mist. You didn't even ask my name, she said, after a long silence. I know your name. The stranger's voice was soft in the darkness. Elena Ashford, 24 years old, unmarried, which your brothers considered a failure on your part. You read voraciously, prefer solitude to company, and haven't smiled in 3 years. Her breath caught. How do you? I've been watching you for quite some time. He leaned forward slightly, and for the first time she saw his eyes clearly. They were black, or perhaps such a deep brown that no light escaped them. Longer than you could possibly imagine. Fear coiled tight in her chest, but beneath it was something else. Curiosity, confusion. Why? Because, he said, and his voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. I've been dreaming of you since the night I died. Elena's world tilted. The carriage, the rain, The impossibility of his words, everything blurred together. What are you? She managed. The stranger smiled. Then, and she saw the truth in the two sharp points of his canines, the unnatural stillness of his chest, the way shadow seemed to cling to him like a living thing. My name is Lucian Corvallis, he said, and I am very old and very dangerous, and the last person in this world who should want you. The carriage rolled on through the rain, carrying her away from everything she'd known and into a darkness she couldn't yet name. But for the first time in 3 years, Elena felt something other than numbness. She felt alive. Chapter 2. The House of Shadows. The carriage traveled for hours through increasingly wild terrain. Elena watched the landscape shift from manicured estates to untamed forest, the trees growing so thick they blocked out what little light remained in the storm-dark sky. She should have been terrified. Instead, she found herself studying the creature across from her. Lucian Corvallis sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees, his breathing so shallow she couldn't detect it. When the carriage hit a particularly rough patch of road, he didn't sway or brace himself. He simply existed, unmoved by physics that governed everything else. You're staring, he said, without opening his eyes. You told me you're dead. I'm trying to reconcile that with the fact that you're sitting here talking to me. I said I died. There's a difference. He opened his eyes, and even in the dim carriage, they seemed to catch and hold what little light existed. Death was merely a doorway. What came after was complicated. How long ago? 347 years this autumn. The number should have been impossible to grasp, but Elena found herself doing the mathematics automatically. The late 17th century. The wars. His eyebrows lifted slightly. You know your history. I told you. I read. She pulled her soaked shawl tighter around her shoulders, though it provided no warmth. If you've existed that long, why now? Why me? Lucian's expression shifted, something raw and almost vulnerable crossing his face before he locked it away. I told you. The dreams. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He leaned back, his gaze never leaving hers. For 3 centuries, I've walked through an endless succession of nights, seen empires rise and collapse, watched generations bloom and wither like flowers and fast forward. And every night, when I seek what passes for sleep among my kind, I see you. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. That's impossible. I'm impossible. Yet here we are. The carriage slowed, then stopped. Lucian rose in a single fluid motion and opened the door before the driver could dismount. Rain poured down in sheets, but he seemed unconcerned as he stepped out and turned back to offer his hand. Elena took it and descended into the storm. Before them rose a house that made her family's crumbling estate look like a cottage. It was built of dark stone that seemed to absorb the rain, 3 stories tall, with towers that pierced the low-hanging clouds. Gothic arches framed narrow windows, most of them dark. The few that glowed did so with a strange amber light that flickered like candlelight, but held too steady. Welcome to Ravencross, Lucian said. It's been my sanctuary for 200 years. He led her up stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use. The massive oak doors opened at his approach, no servant, no visible mechanism, just the doors swinging inward as if welcoming their master home. The entrance hall stole Elena's breath. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow above them. A grand staircase curved upward, its banister carved with intricate patterns of ravens and roses intertwined. Candles burned in iron sconces along the walls, hundreds of them, their flames dancing without any draft to move them. You live here alone? Elena asked, her voice echoing in the vast space. Mostly. I employ a small staff who manage the estate during daylight hours. They know what I am. They're well compensated for their discretion. He removed his wet coat, revealing a dark waistcoat and white shirt beneath. Even drenched, he looked like he'd stepped out of a painting. At night, the house is mine, ours, Elena corrected quietly. He looked at her sharply. What? You brought me here. Whatever this arrangement is, for however long it lasts, this house is ours, not yours. She met his gaze steadily. I may be purchased, but I'm not property. If you wanted a possession, you chose poorly. For a long moment, Lucian simply stared at her. Then, incredibly, he smiled, a real smile that softened the harsh lines of his face and made him look almost human. Yes, he said softly. I believe I chose exactly right. He led her through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women in outdated clothing. Elena caught glimpses of other rooms, a library that seemed to stretch on forever. a dining hall with a table that could seat 50, a conservatory where plants grew in wild profusion despite the late hour in season. You'll stay in the east wing, Lucian said, stopping before a heavy wooden door. These rooms haven't been occupied in decades, but they've been prepared for you. He opened the door, and Elena stepped into a suite that was larger than her entire bedroom had been at home. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in deep blue velvet. A fireplace crackled with fresh flames. Bookshelves lined one wall, already filled with leather-bound volumes. There's a bathing room through that door, Lucian continued. Hot water, clean clothes in the wardrobe. Anything you need, ring the bell and someone will come. During daylight hours, Elena said. Yes, and at night? Something dangerous flickered in his expression. At night, you'll be alone. Safer that way. Safer for whom? Lucian moved closer, and Elena suddenly became aware of how much taller he was, how his presence seemed to fill the space between them. For both of us, he said quietly. I may have dreamed of you for 300 years, Elena, but I'm still a predator. And you smell like sunlight and summer rain and everything. I've been denied since the night I was turned. Her pulse jumped. She should step back, create distance. Instead, she asked, what does that mean? How were you turned? That's a story for another night. He moved toward the door, putting blessed space between them. Rest. Recover from your journey. Tomorrow, when the sun rises and I'm confined to my chambers, explore the house. Learn its secrets. And tomorrow night, we'll begin to understand why fate has been cruel enough to bind us together. Lucian, Elena called. As he reached the threshold, he paused, his hand on the doorframe. Thank you. For the books. His smile was sad this time, weighted with centuries of loneliness. She was only beginning to comprehend. I told you, I've been dreaming of you. I know what brings you comfort. Then he was gone. The door closing softly behind him, leaving Elena alone in a vampire's house with more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that her brothers had sold her into something far stranger and more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. She touched the spines of the books on the shelf and found her favorite worn copy of Wuthering Heights. He knew. Somehow, impossibly he knew. Elena sank into the chair by the fire and opened the book to a random page, seeking comfort in familiar words while her world shifted beneath her feet. Chapter 3. Daylight Discovery. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through windows she hadn't noticed in the darkness. She sat up slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar softness of the bed. The silk of the nightgown someone had left folded on a chair while she'd bathed the night before. The house felt different in daylight, quieter, as if it were holding its breath. She dressed in one of the gowns from the wardrobe, a simple dove-gray dress that fit her perfectly, which should have been impossible. Another sign that Lucian had been planning this, watching her, learning her in ways that made her skin prickle with unease, and something else she didn't want to name. The hallways looked less ominous in the morning light, though no less grand. Elena descended the main staircase, running her hand along the carved banister. Ravens and roses, intertwined so intricately she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. A woman appeared at the base of the stairs, middle-aged, dressed in practical gray, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Miss Ashford. I'm Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper. I trust you slept well? Yes, thank you. Elena reached the bottom step. I wasn't sure if I should. If there were rules, I should know. The master left instructions. You're to have full access to the house and grounds. The library, the conservatory, the gardens, all of it. Mrs. Brennan's expression remained neutral, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. There's only one place you mustn't go. Let me guess. His chambers. The West Wing, Mrs. Brennan confirmed, particularly during daylight hours. The master requires absolute privacy when he rests. Elena nodded slowly. Because the sun would kill him, Mrs. Brennan didn't flinch at the blunt statement. Among other reasons. Breakfast is laid out in the morning room. I'll show you. The morning room was smaller than the dining hall, with tall windows overlooking gardens that sprawled toward distant woods. A table held fresh bread, preserves, fruit, and tea that steamed invitingly. Elena ate alone, watching the gardens. She could see figures moving among the hedges, groundskeepers, she assumed. Normal people doing normal work in a house owned by something that shouldn't exist. After breakfast, she explored the library first, because books had always been her refuge. It was even more magnificent in daylight, 3 stories of shelves connected by spiral staircases, with reading nooks tucked into alcoves and windows that let in long shafts of golden light. She found an entire section devoted to vampire lore. Not fiction, but historical texts, medical treatises, philosophical debates, books in languages she couldn't read, and some she could. She pulled out a leather-bound volume titled The Covenant of Houses, Laws and Limitations of the Night Courts. The frontispiece showed a crest, a raven clutching a rose in its talons, the same design carved into the banister. Lucien's house symbol. Elena carried the book to a window seat and began to read. The text was dense, formal, written in the style of legal documents. But certain passages made her breath catch. No vampire shall take a human life without absolute consent, freely given and documented before witnesses of standing. The penalty for violation is final death by sunlight exposure. Blood bonds require mutual agreement and cannot be forged through coercion or deception. A bond made in bad faith dissolves upon discovery of the deception. Each house maintains sovereignty over its territory and subjects. Incursions by rival houses constitute acts of war. Elena read for hours, piecing together a picture of a hidden society that existed alongside the human world. Ancient families' houses that governed themselves through strict codes of honor and brutal enforcement. Vampires who could live centuries if they followed the rules, but who faced swift execution if they broke them. Lucien's house, Corvallis, was one of the oldest. The text referred to him as Lord Corvallis, keeper of the Northern Territories, last of his line, last of his line. Alone for 200 years in this enormous house. You should eat something. Elena jumped, nearly dropping the book. Mrs. Brennan stood in the doorway with a tray. I'm sorry. I got distracted. It's past 3 in the afternoon. You've been reading for 6 hours. The housekeeper set the tray on a nearby table. The master said you'd do this. He had me prepare lunch to bring to you. He knew I'd lose track of time in a library. He said. Mrs. Brennan paused, something softening in her stern features. He said you'd disappear into books the way he disappears into darkness. That you'd need reminding to come back. Elena's throat tightened. How long have you worked for him? 30 years. I was young when I came here, running from a husband who enjoyed using his fists. Lord Corvallis found me on the road to the village, half dead from cold and bleeding. He brought me here, gave me work. And when my husband came looking, she met Elena's eyes. The master can be terrifying when he chooses. My husband never came back. You're not afraid of him. I'm terrified of him, Mrs. Brennan corrected. But I trust him. There's a difference. He's a monster, Miss Ashford, but he's a monster with honor. And in my experience, that's rarer than you'd think among men living or dead. After the housekeeper left, Elena ate mechanically, her mind churning. She returned to the book, reading about blood bonds and day sleep vulnerabilities and the complex politics of the houses. One passage made her stop cold. The phenomenon of dream binding is exceedingly rare and poorly understood. In documented cases, a vampire experiences recurring dreams of a specific human over extended periods, sometimes decades or centuries. The cause remains unknown, though some scholars theorize a form of fate or predestination. Dream-bound pairs, when united, form bonds of unusual strength and volatility. Elena closed the book and stared out at the gardens, where shadows were growing longer as afternoon faded toward evening. Lucien would wake soon. The house would shift from this strange daytime quiet to whatever the nights held. She should be planning escape, searching for ways out. Instead, she found herself in the conservatory, surrounded by night-blooming flowers that were just beginning to open in anticipation of darkness. You didn't run. His voice came from the doorway. Elena turned to find Lucien watching her, dressed in dark trousers and a white shirt, his hair still damp from washing. He looked less severe than last night, almost human, except for the unnatural stillness. Where would I go? Elena asked. Back to brothers who sold me, to a world that never wanted me? You could have tried. Would you have stopped me? Lucien moved into the conservatory, his fingers trailing over a jasmine vine. I don't know. I've never been good at letting go of things I want, and you want me. I've wanted you since before you were born. His eyes met hers, dark and fathomless. The question is, now that you know what I am, now that you've read about the dangers and the laws and the darkness, are you going to run screaming? Or are you curious enough to stay? Elena thought about the empty years behind her, the brothers who'd discarded her, the life that had felt like slowly drowning in shallows. I'm curious, she admitted. Lucian's smile was sharp and dangerous and achingly beautiful. Then let me show you what darkness really looks like. Chapter 4. The teaching of shadow solution led her through the house as twilight deepened into full night. The candles seemed to burn brighter in his presence, as if responding to their master's waking. You read the covenant, he said, as they walked. It wasn't a question, Mrs. Brennan said. I had access to everything. She's more literal-minded than I gave her credit for. He glanced at her sidelong. Most humans who learn what we are either run or try to kill us. You went to the library. Knowledge is armor, Elena said. Or at least, it's better than ignorance. They entered a room she hadn't discovered in her explorations, a study lined with maps and charts. A massive desk covered in correspondence written in flowing script. Lucian moved to a cabinet and withdrew 2 crystal glasses and a decanter of amber liquid. Whiskey, he said, pouring. 60 years old. I can't taste it anymore. Not really, but I remember what it should taste like. Sometimes that's enough. He handed her a glass. Their fingers brushed, and Elena felt the coldness of his skin. The absence of a living pulse. You don't have to pretend to drink with me, she said. I'm not pretending. He raised the glass to his lips and took a small sip, his expression distant. The liquid passes through me, provides no nourishment, no warmth, but the ritual remains. A ghost of being human. Elena sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Is that what you are? A ghost? Something like that. Lucian settled into the chair across from her, the desk between them like a negotiating table. When I was turned, I died. My heart stopped. My lungs ceased their work. What animates me now is something other than life. Older, hungrier, blood, yes, but not in the way your gothic novels portray it. He leaned forward slightly. I don't need to kill. In fact, the laws forbid it. Blood freely given sustains us far better than blood taken by force. Consent matters, Elena. It's written into the very fabric of what we are. The covenant mentioned that. Penalties for violation, final death, Lucian confirmed. Exposure to sunlight until nothing remains but ash. I've witnessed 3 executions in my lifetime. They're not pleasant, even when deserved. Elena sipped her whiskey, feeling its burn slide down her throat. You said you were turned during the wars. What happened? For a long moment, Lucian didn't answer. He stared into his glass as if seeking answers in its depths. I was a soldier, he finally said, fighting for a cause I believed in with the arrogance of youth. We were ambushed one night in a forest not unlike the one surrounding this house. My men were slaughtered. I was left dying when she found me. She? Lady Morgaine Corvallis, head of this house, ancient even then. His voice went soft, distant. She gave me a choice, die in the mud with my brothers in arms, or live forever in darkness. I chose poorly. You regret it. Every single night for 347 years, he met her eyes, and the pain in his gaze was so raw it made her chest ache. But I was too much a coward to seek the sun, so I endured, learned the laws, rose through the house ranks, eventually inherited everything when Morgaine finally tired of existence and walked into dawn. You've been alone since then, 200 years alone in this house, yes. Surrounded by staff during the day, but truly alone when night falls. He set down his glass with careful precision. Do you know what that does to a mind? Centuries of isolation, punctuated only by political necessities and blood exchanges with consenting donors who see me as a monster to be feared or a curiosity to be studied. Elena's heart twisted. She understood loneliness, had lived it differently, but just as deeply surrounded by family who saw her as a burden, a society that found her odd. Years of quiet desperation in a life too small for the person she was inside. Then the dreams started, Lucian continued. About 20 years ago. At first, just flashes, a woman's laugh, the scent of lavender, hands turning pages of a book. They grew more detailed over time. I saw you grow from child to woman, watched you navigate a world that didn't understand you. Felt your loneliness echo mine. That should terrify me, Elena whispered, but it doesn't. No, she stood, moving around the desk to where he sat. It should. You're a stranger who's been watching me through dreams, who purchased me from my brothers like livestock. Every rational part of my mind is screaming that this is dangerous. Then why are you still here? Elena looked down at him, this ancient, dangerous creature who somehow seemed vulnerable in the candlelight. Because for the first time in my life, someone sees me. Not the disappointment my family wanted me to be. Not the oddity society labeled me. You see me, Lucian. And maybe that makes me foolish. But I'm tired of being invisible. He stood slowly, carefully, as if afraid sudden movement might break whatever fragile thing was forming between them. I need to feed soon. The hunger becomes difficult to control if I wait too long. The donors, Mrs. Brennan mentioned, they come twice weekly. Humans who understand what I am and consent to the exchange. I pay them well, ensure their health, never take more than they can spare. He moved toward the door. You should return to your rooms. I'll be occupied for several hours. Can I stay? Lucian froze. What? Not during the feeding, Elena clarified quickly. But after? You said you'd show me what darkness looks like. I want to understand this world you live in. Elena, I'm not asking to be part of the feeding. I'm asking you not to hide from me. She stepped closer. You've spent 200 years alone. Maybe it's time to let someone in. Something shifted in his expression, hope warring with fear, desire fighting caution. Wait in the library. When I'm finished, we'll talk. Really? Talk. No more secrets. No more careful dancing around the truth. Promise? I promise. He reached out, his fingers hovering near her cheek before he pulled back. You're making this very difficult, you know. What? Maintaining the distance I need to keep you safe from me. Elena met his dark eyes. Maybe I don't want to be safe. Then you're braver or more foolish than anyone I've met in 3 centuries. But he smiled as he said it. And for a moment, the weight of his years seemed to lift. After he left, Elena returned to the library. She found herself drawn back to the section on vampire lore. Specifically, the passages about dream binding, bonds of unusual strength and volatility. The text had said, she traced the words with her finger, wondering what she'd stepped into, what fate or chance or cosmic joke had bound a dying vampire to a girl who wouldn't be born for 300 years. Outside the windows, the night deepened. Somewhere in this vast house, Lucian was sustaining himself on donated blood, maintaining the careful balance between monster and man, and Elena waited in the library, surrounded by books and candlelight, feeling more alive than she had in years. Chapter 5. The warning in blue. Elena had fallen asleep in the library, her head resting on an open book about house politics. When the sound of shattering glass jolted her awake, she sat up sharply, disoriented. The candles had burned low, and through the windows she could see the sky beginning to lighten with the first hints of pre-dawn. Gray. Footsteps ran past the library door, Mrs. Brennan's voice calling orders to other staff members. Then Lucian appeared in the doorway, and Elena's breath caught. Blood stained his white shirt, dark and wet. His face was harder than she'd ever seen it, all traces of the vulnerable man from earlier erased by something ancient and predatory. Stay here, he commanded. What happened? Someone send a message. Stay in this room until I return. He turned to leave. Lucian. Elena was on her feet, crossing to him before she could think better of it. You're hurt, not my blood. His eyes met hers, and she saw fury there, barely controlled. They killed my donor, drained him completely and left him on my doorstep like a calling card. Horror washed over her. Who? House Blackwood. An old rival. His jaw clenched. This is a declaration of intent. They're coming for my territory, and they want me to know it. Mrs. Brennan appeared behind him, her face pale but composed. The staff are secured in the east wing. The body has been moved to the cellar. What are your orders, my lord? Send word to the village. Everyone under my protection is to shelter in their homes until further notice. No one travels the roads after dark. He looked at Elena. You'll stay in your rooms during daylight. When night falls, you stay with me. Understood? I'm not a child to be ordered about. No, you're a human in a house about to become a battlefield. His voice was hard, brooking no argument. House Blackwood doesn't follow the covenant as strictly as they should. If they breach these walls, they won't hesitate to use you against me. The weight of that settled over Elena like ice water. She was a weakness, now, a vulnerability he hadn't had before her arrival. This is because of me, she said quietly. They know you brought a human here. They think it makes you weak. Lucian's expression softened fractionally. They think many things, most of them wrong. He glanced at the windows, where the sky was growing lighter. I need to seek my chambers. The sun will rise soon. Mrs. Brennan will stay with you during the day. And tonight? Tonight we prepare for war. He left, moving with inhuman speed down the corridor. Elena stood in the library doorway, watching him disappear, feeling the house shift around her from sanctuary to fortress in the space of minutes. Mrs. Brennan touched her elbow gently. Come, miss. Let's get you somewhere safer. The housekeeper led her back to the east wing, where the other staff had gathered: a cook, two maids, and a groundskeeper, all looking frightened, but determined. Has this happened before? Elena asked. Twice, Mrs. Brennan said. Once, about 15 years ago, House Ashmore tested our borders. Lord Corvallis handled it diplomatically. The second time was 8 years past. House Blackwood sent scouts. The master drove them off personally. What do they want? Territory, power. Lord Corvallis holds the largest territory in the north, and he holds it alone. No allies, no family, no house members beyond himself. To other houses, that looks like weakness waiting to be exploited. Elena moved to the window, looking out at the grounds. In the growing daylight, she could see disturbances in the garden: trampled flowers, broken branches. Signs of the night's intrusion. He's been fighting alone for 200 years, she murmured. Yes, miss, that's going to change, Mrs. Brennan looked at her sharply. What are you planning? I don't know yet. Elena turned from the window. But I didn't survive my brother's betrayal just to hide in a room while someone else fights my battles. Show me the house's defenses. Everything Lucian would use to protect this place. The housekeeper hesitated, then nodded slowly. The master won't like this. The master is asleep and can't object. Elena managed a grim smile. And by the time he wakes, I'll either have something useful or I'll have proven I'm as useless as my brothers always said. Either way, we'll know. Mrs. Brennan led her through the house, showing her things Elena hadn't noticed before: iron gates that could be lowered over windows, reinforced doors and key corridors. A weapons room filled with silver-tipped crossbow bolts and stakes made of ashwood. Silver doesn't kill vampires, Mrs. Brennan explained, but it burns them, slows them down. And ashwood through the heart is one of the few ways to achieve final death without sunlight. Elena studied the weapons with the same focus she'd given to books. Knowledge was armor, she'd told Lucian. Now she needed to make it a sword as well. In the cellar, she found maps, detailed charts of the surrounding territories, showing House Corvallis lands and neighboring domains. House Blackwood's territory pressed against Lucian's southern border, a constant threat. They've been encroaching for decades, Mrs. Brennan said, pointing to marks on the map. Taking villages that should be under Lord Corvallis' protection. Testing boundaries. Why hasn't he pushed back? He's one vampire against an entire house. Lady Blackwood has 5 turned children, all of them vicious. Direct confrontation would be suicide. Elena traced the boundary lines with her finger, her mind working. But he has something they don't. What's that, miss? 347 years of surviving alone. That doesn't happen by strength alone. He's smart, strategic. She looked up at the housekeeper. And now he has something else they won't expect. What? A human who's tired of being underestimated. The day passed intense preparation. Elena read everything she could find about House Blackwood: their tactics, their history, the documented conflicts they'd engaged in over the centuries. She learned that Lady Blackwood was old, nearly as old as Lucian, but cruel where he was controlled. Her house operated on fear and domination rather than the careful consent-based structure Lucian maintained. As the sun began to set, Elena felt the house change. The air grew heavier, charged with anticipation. She returned to her rooms and dressed carefully, not in the delicate gowns from the wardrobe, but in a simple dark dress that would allow her to move freely. When full darkness fell, she made her way to Lucian's study. He was already there, dressed in black, examining correspondence that had arrived during the day. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. You didn't rest, he observed. Neither did you, I'd wager. Not truly. Day sleep isn't the same as rest. He set down the letter he'd been reading. Mrs. Brennan tells me you spent the day studying my defenses and plotting. I spent the day learning. There's a difference. Lucian moved around the desk, studying her with those ancient, knowing eyes. You should be afraid. House Blackwood killed a man just to send me a message. They won't hesitate to do worse. I am afraid, Elena admitted, but I'm also angry. And I'm done letting fear make my decisions. Something flickered in his expression: approval, perhaps, or concern. You're not a soldier, Elena. This isn't your war. You made it my war when you brought me here. She stepped closer. They'll use me against you. You said so yourself. Which means I need to be an asset, not a liability. And how do you propose to do that? Elena met his gaze steadily. Teach me, not just about your world, but how to survive in it. You've spent centuries alone because you had no choice. Now you do. So stop treating me like something fragile and start treating me like a partner. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled, dangerous and beautiful and filled with dark promise. All right, he said. Let's see if you can keep up with the darkness. Chapter 6. The blood oath. Lucian led her to a part of the house she hadn't yet explored, down stone steps that descended beneath the main structure, into passages lit by torches that burned with an eerie blue-white flame. What is this place? Elena asked, her voice echoing off ancient walls. The old house chambers. When Corvallis was a full house, when Lady Morgaine ruled and we numbered in the dozens, this is where we gathered for rituals and councils. His hand trailed along the stone as they walked. Now it's just me and ghosts. They entered a circular chamber carved entirely from black stone. In the center stood a raised dais with a bowl carved into its surface, dark metal that looked like tarnished silver but felt wrong somehow, as if it absorbed light rather than reflecting it. This is where blood oaths are sworn, Lucian said. Where vampires bind themselves to laws, to each other, to purposes greater than individual survival. Elena approached the dais slowly. The air felt heavier here, saturated with old magic. You said blood bonds require consent. Is that what this is? Not exactly. Lucian moved to stand across from her, the bowl between them. A blood bond is intimate. It ties to beings together, allows them to sense each other across distances, share strength and weakness. What I'm proposing is different. An oath of protection and alliance. Why? Because if House Blackwood attacks, they'll come in force. I can defend this house, but I can't be everywhere at once. If they manage to separate us, if they get you alone. He stopped, his jaw clenching. I need you to have protection I can enforce even when I'm not physically present. Elena studied the bowl, then looked up at him. What does this oath entail? My blood willingly given. Your acceptance of it, willingly taken. Not enough to turn you, that would require your death and rebirth. Just enough to mark you as under my house's protection. Any vampire who harms you would be violating covenant law and subject to execution. And what does it cost me? Lucian's expression was grave. Honesty. I won't lie to you about this. My blood in your veins will create a connection. You'll be able to sense me, my location, my emotional state when it's particularly strong. I'll sense the same from you. It's not full bonding, but it's not nothing either. How long does it last? Until you choose to break it. Or until one of us dies. He leaned forward, his hands bracing on either side of the bowl. I'm asking you to tie yourself to me, Elena, to a monster who's already dragged you into a war you didn't choose. You have every right to refuse. Elena looked at this ancient creature, who'd been alone for centuries, who'd dreamed of her before she was born, who was offering her protection at the cost of his own privacy and power. If I do this, she said slowly, I want something in return. Lucian's eyebrows rose. You're negotiating? You said blood bonds require consent freely given. That means both parties agree to terms. She straightened her shoulders. If I'm going to carry your blood, if I'm going to be marked as House Corvallis, then I want the truth. All of it. No more careful evasions or protective silences. I want to know what we're facing, who these enemies are, and what your actual plan is for surviving this. For a moment, Lucian simply stared at her. Then he laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuinely delighted. 300 years, and I've never met anyone who tried to negotiate the terms of a protection oath. First time for everything. Indeed. His smile faded to something more serious. Very well. The truth then. All of it. He began to pace around the dais, his movements restless in a way she'd never seen from him before. House Blackwood has been encroaching on my territory for 50 years. Small movements at first, claiming a village here, a road there. I've pushed back diplomatically because direct confrontation would be suicide. Lady Blackwood has 5 turned children, all of them skilled fighters. I have no one. Why didn't you turn others? Build your own house? Because turning someone is an intimate act that creates a permanent bond. I would need to choose carefully someone I trusted absolutely, someone who wanted immortality for the right reasons. In 200 years, I never found anyone who met that criteria. He stopped, looking at her. Until recently. Elena's heart skipped. You're not suggesting no, not now, perhaps not ever. That's your choice to make when and if you choose to make it, he resumed, pacing. Lady Blackwood knows I'm alone. She's been waiting for the right moment to strike some weakness she could exploit. Then I brought you here, and I became that weakness. You became the thing I care about most in this world, which, to a creature like Lady Blackwood, is the same as a weapon pointed at my chest. His voice went hard. She killed my donor to send a message. She can reach into my home and take what's mine. Next, she'll come for you. When? Soon. The new moon is in 3 days. Vampires are strongest in complete darkness, and she'll use that advantage. He moved back to the days, across from her. She'll bring her children and whatever allies she's gathered. They'll lay siege to this house, and won't leave until either they're dead or I am. Elena's mouth went dry. Those are grim odds. They are. Which is why I'm offering you a choice. Take the oath, accept my protection and the connection that comes with it, and stay to fight. Or I'll send you away tonight, to the coast, where I have contacts who can keep you safe until this is over. And if you lose, then you'll be free of me and the darkness I've brought into your life. Elena looked down at the bowl, thinking about her brothers who'd sold her, the life she'd left behind, the years of quiet desperation in a world that had never seen her. Then she looked at Lucien, dangerous, ancient, and offering her the first real choice anyone had given her in years. How do we do this? She asked. Relief and something darker, hope, maybe flickered across his face. Are you certain? I've never been more certain of anything. She placed her hands on the edge of the bowl. Show me. Lucien drew a small knife from his coat, silver, she noted, which meant it would burn him. He held his palm over the bowl and drew the blade across his skin in one swift motion. Blood welled up, dark and rich, dripping into the bowl. The metal seemed to come alive, patterns forming in its surface that glowed with faint red light. My blood, freely given, Lucien said formally, to mark Elena Ashford as protected under House Corvallis law, to bind us in alliance until death or dissolution. He nodded to her. Elena picked up the knife, her hand steady despite her racing heart. She cut her own palm not deep, just enough to let blood flow. She let it fall into the bowl, where it mixed with his. The moment their blood touched, Elena gasped. Heat rushed through her veins like lightning, followed by a cold that went bone deep. She felt Lucien's presence in her mind, not thoughts exactly, but emotions. Ancient grief and fresh hope and fierce determination, and something else, something that felt like recognition, like coming home. Elena, Lucien said, his voice strained. You need to drink. She looked up, disoriented. He dipped his fingers into the mixed blood and held them toward her, just a taste. To seal the oath, Elena leaned forward and took his fingers into her mouth. The blood tasted like copper and earth and winter nights. Power flooded through her, foreign but not unwelcome. She felt Lucien in the house above them, in the darkness surrounding them, in the very stones beneath their feet. When she released his hand, the bowl's glow faded. Lucien stared at her with something like awe. You didn't hesitate. Should I have? Most humans need to be convinced, reassured. You just decided. Elena looked at her palm, where the cut was already beginning to close faster than it should. I'm tired of hesitating. Tired of letting fear make me small. She met his eyes. You said darkness, Lucien. Show me how to fight in it. His smile was sharp and proud. Then let's begin your education in staying alive. Chapter 7. Night of Broken Shield. She attack came 2 nights later. An hour before midnight, when the household was at its most vulnerable transition between daylight routines and night defenses, Elena was in the armory with Lucien, learning to load a crossbow with silver-tipped bolts. When the first window shattered, east wing, Lucien said instantly, his head snapping toward the sound. Through the blood oath, Elena felt his spike of alarm followed by cold, tactical assessment. They're testing our response time. Stay behind me. They moved through the corridors at inhuman speed, or rather, Lucien moved and Elena ran to keep up, her heart pounding. She could feel him through the bond now, a constant presence in the back of her mind, like a second heartbeat. Mrs. Brennan met them in the hallway, a silver dagger in her hand. 4 vampires breached the east perimeter. The staff are secured in the wine cellar as planned. Good. Get there yourself and seal the door. Lucien's voice was all command. Now. The gentle scholar from previous nights replaced by the soldier he'd been 3 centuries ago. Don't open it for anyone but me or Elena. The housekeeper hesitated, looking at Elena. Miss, I'll be fine, Elena said with more confidence than she felt. Go. Another crash. Closer this time. Glass exploding, wood splintering. Lucien's hand found Elena's, his grip cold and sure. Remember what we practiced, he said. Silver slows them. Ash wood kills. Aim for center mass, not the heart. You're more likely to hit something vital. And if they get past you? His eyes met hers, dark and fierce. They won't. They reach the East Wing sitting room to find it destroyed. Furniture overturned, curtains shredded, and 3 vampires circling like wolves who'd found prey. They were younger than Lucy, and Elena could tell by the way they moved, by the hunger in their eyes that lacked his control. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in black, all bearing the sigil of House Blackwood, a thorned crown dripping blood. Lord Corvallis, the woman said, her voice mocking. How quaint. Defending your little pet yourself? Amara. Lucian moved Elena behind him smoothly. Still doing Lady Blackwood's dirty work, I see. When will you develop thoughts of your own? The vampire's eyes flashed red. Mother sends her regards. And an invitation to surrender your territory peacefully. We'll even let the human live. How generous. Decline. We thought you might say that. They attacked simultaneously, coordinated, practiced. Lucian met them with speed that made Elena's eyes water, his movements precise and brutal. He caught the first male vampire by the throat and threw him through the already broken window. The second he dodged, spinning to deliver a kick that sent him crashing into the wall. But Amara had been a feint. While Lucian was occupied, a 4th vampire, one they hadn't seen, dropped from the ceiling directly toward Elena. Training overrode panic. Elena raised the crossbow and fired. The bolt took the vampire in the shoulder, silver burning on impact. He screamed and stumbled, giving Elena time to roll aside and grab for the ashwood stake at her belt. She didn't think. She drove it forward with all her strength. The vampire's eyes went wide with shock. He looked down at the stake protruding from his chest, then at Elena. You're just human. Then he crumbled to ash. Elena stared at the pile of dust, her hands shaking. She'd just killed someone, something, ended an existence that had lasted who knew how long. Elena. Lucian's warning came through the bond a split second before Amara's hand closed around her throat. The female vampire lifted Elena off her feet with ease, slamming her against the wall. Clever little pet, but not clever enough. Elena couldn't breathe. Black spots danced in her vision. Through the bond, she felt Lucian's rage like a physical force, saw him destroy the male vampire he'd been fighting with savage efficiency. Let her go. His voice was something from nightmares, ancient and terrible. Amara laughed, her grip tightening. Or what? You'll kill me? My mother will rain down hell on this pathetic house. You can't win this, Corvallis. You're alone. He's not alone, Elena gasped out. She'd managed to work her hand into her pocket, fingers closing around the vial Lucian had given her 2 nights ago. Holy water, not fatal to vampires, but painful. Distracting. She smashed the vial against Amara's face. The vampire shrieked, her grip loosening. Elena dropped, gasping, and rolled away. Lucian was there instantly, his hand punching through Amara's chest and ripping out her heart. The female vampire collapsed, already turning to ash. Silence fell over the destroyed room, broken only by Elena's ragged breathing and the sound of the remaining male vampire scrambling to escape through the window. Lucian let him go. He was at Elena's side in an instant, his hands gentle as they examined her throat, where bruises were already forming. You're hurt, he said. And there was something raw in his voice. I'm alive. Elena's voice came out rough, painful. We both are. You killed one of them. A vampire twice your age and 10 times your strength. You taught me well. His laugh was shaky, almost disbelieving. You're insane. Brilliant and brave and absolutely insane. Through the bond, Elena felt his fear transmuting to something else, pride, admiration, and beneath it all, a growing attachment that terrified him more than the attack had. A slow clapping echoed through the broken windows. Both of them turned to see a figure standing in the gardens, a woman in a gown that seemed made of shadows, her hair silver white, her eyes burning red even from a distance. Lady Blackwood, Lucian said quietly, Lord Corvallis, and the famous human who's caused such a stir. The vampire's voice carried easily across the space between them. She fights well for prey. I'm almost impressed. State your business and leave my territory. My business is simple. Surrender, or watch everyone under your protection die. Lady Blackwood gestured, and Elena's blood ran cold. Surrounding the house, materializing from shadows, were dozens of vampires. Too many to fight, too many to survive. You have until the new moon, Lady Blackwood continued. 3 days. Renounce your claim to these territories and swear fealty to House Blackwood, or we'll paint these halls with blood, human and vampire alike. And if I agree, then you live, diminished, subservient, but alive. The human can go free, your staff will be spared. All I want is what should have been mine decades ago. Lucien's hand found Elena's, his grip almost painful. She felt his calculation through the bond weighing options, searching for angles, finding none that didn't end in massacre. I'll consider your offer, he said finally. Lady Blackwood smiled, predatory and cold. See that you do. The new moon waits for no one, Lord Corvallis. Not even the last of your line. She vanished, and with her, the surrounding vampires melded back into darkness. Elena turned to Lucien, seeing the defeat in his eyes. You can't seriously be considering I'm considering how to keep you alive, he cut her off. That's all that matters. No, Elena grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. We don't surrender. We fight. Against an army? With what forces? Through the bond, she felt his despair, his certainty that this was an unwinnable situation. But she also felt something else, the faintest ember of the hope he'd carried for 300 years. The hope that had kept him from seeking the sun. With intelligence, Elena said. With strategy. With the fact that she's overconfident and we're desperate. She pulled him toward the study. You've survived this long by being smarter than your enemies. So let's be smarter now. Show me everything you know about House Blackwood. Every weakness, every grudge, every secret. We have 3 days, Elena, 3 days to find a way to survive this. Together. She squeezed his hand. You said you've been alone for 200 years. You're not anymore. So stop thinking like you are. Lucien stared at her, and slowly, that ember of hope began to grow. You're really not going to let me surrender. Not a chance. His smile was fierce and beautiful, and tinged with desperate hope. Then let's go to war. Chapter 8. Strategy and Scarsty worked through the night in Lucien's study. Maps and documents spread across every surface. Elena's throat ached where Amara had gripped her, but she refused to rest while her mind was racing with possibilities. House Blackwood's strength is in numbers, Lucien said, pointing to notes he'd compiled over decades. Lady Blackwood turned her 5 children over the course of a century. Each of them has turned others with her permission. That's how she built an army while I remained alone. But armies have weaknesses. Elena studied the family tree he'd sketched. Hierarchies, power struggles. You said vampire bonds are intimate. Does that mean they're also complicated? Always. Lucien moved to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. When you turn someone, you're their sire. They're bound to obey you, to a degree. But that bond can breed resentment, especially if the sire is cruel, and Lady Blackwood is cruel, exceptionally. She rules through fear and punishment. Her children hate her as much as they fear her. Elena's mind caught on something. Then why do they stay? Why not break away? Form their own houses? Because breaking a sire bond before it naturally weakens, usually after a century or more, requires a blood ritual. And the sire has to consent to release them. Lucien's expression darkened. Lady Blackwood would never consent. She'd rather destroy them than lose control. What if we could turn them against her? Lucien looked at her sharply. What are you thinking? You said Amara and the others are doing Lady Blackwood's dirty work. What if they didn't want to? What if they're looking for a way out and just don't see one? Elena turned to face him fully. What if we offered them one? You want to negotiate with the vampires who just attacked us. I want to fracture their forces before the new moon. Make Lady Blackwood's army turn on itself. She could see the idea taking shape, dangerous and desperate. You've survived alone by being strategic. This is strategy. Lucien was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the desk. Through the bond, Elena felt him turning the idea over, examining it from every angle. It's risky, he finally said. If Lady Blackwood discovers we're trying to turn her children, she'll accelerate the attack. We might not make it to the new moon. And if we do nothing, we definitely won't make it past the new moon. Elena placed her hand over his. You said you'd never found anyone worthy of being turned, but you have 5 potential allies who are already turned and already hate their sire. Use that. I'd need to contact them without Lady Blackwood knowing. That alone could get them killed, so we're careful. Strategic. Elena squeezed his hand. You've been playing this game for 3 centuries. Play it now. His smile was slow, dangerous, and admiring. You're devious. I'm beginning to think you're more dangerous than I am. Good. Then we're evenly matched. They spent the next 2 hours crafting messages careful. coded communications that could reach Lady Blackwood's children without alerting her. Lucian had contacts, neutral vampires who traded in information and could act as intermediaries. As dawn approached, Elena felt exhaustion pulling at her. The adrenaline from the attack was fading, leaving behind bone-deep weariness and the delayed shock of having killed someone. You should rest, Lucian said, noticing her fatigue through the bond. I need to seek day sleep soon anyway. I killed someone tonight. The words came out quieter than she'd intended. Turned him to ash. Lucian moved to where she sat, kneeling, so they were eye level. You defended yourself. That's not the same as murder. Doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. He reached up, his cold fingers gentle against her bruised throat. I'm sorry you had to do that. Sorry I brought you into a world where that was necessary. Elena caught his hand, holding it against her cheek. I chose to stay, chose to take the oath. This is as much my fight now as yours. You shouldn't have to fight at all. You should be safe, somewhere far from this darkness. I was safe before. Safe and small, and slowly dying of boredom and loneliness. She turned her face to press a kiss to his palm, feeling him go still. I'd rather be here, fighting beside you, than safe and alone somewhere else. Through the bond, she felt his reaction, desire and fear and desperate longing all tangled together. He pulled his hand back as if burned. Elena, we can't, he stood abruptly, putting distance between them. You don't understand what you're asking. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you the truth. The truth is, I'm a monster who's existed for over 3 centuries. Who's killed, who's fed on humans, who's watched everyone I've ever cared about die or leave. You're 24 years old, with your whole life ahead of you. A life I didn't want until I came here. That's the bond talking. The blood oath creates artificial attachment. Don't, Elena stood, crossing to him. Don't diminish what I feel by blaming it on magic. I was drawn to you before the oath. Or have you forgotten? I chose to stay when you gave me the chance to leave. Lucian's control was cracking. She could see it in his eyes, feel it through the bond. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. You're not the only one who's been alone, Lucian. The only one who's felt like they didn't fit in the world they were born into. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling the absence of a pulse. You've been dreaming of me for 20 years. Did you ever stop to think maybe I've been waiting for you just as long, even if I didn't know what I was waiting for? He caught her hand, his grip almost painful. If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. I won't be able to let you go, ever. Then don't. Lucian stared at her, and she watched centuries of loneliness, war with the iron control he'd maintained for so long. Through the bond, she felt the moment his control broke. He kissed her. It was nothing like she'd imagined, not gentle or hesitant, but desperate and claiming, and 300 years of isolation pouring into a single point of contact. His hands cupped her face, angling her head, and she rose on her toes to meet him. He was cold, impossibly cold, but where their lips met she felt heat, power, connection deeper than the blood oath, more fundamental than any magic. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena was breathing hard. Lucian's chest still didn't move. He rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he whispered, probably the worst we've had yet. You're going to destroy me. Elena smiled against his lips. Only if you're lucky. He laughed, the sound raw and genuine, and kissed her again. Softer this time, sweeter, like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth. But through the bond, Elena felt the edges of his hunger stirring. Not the mindless need she'd feared, but something more controlled, more conscious. She pulled back slightly. You need to feed. I can wait. No, you can't. The sun's almost up, and we have a war to plan tomorrow night. She touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. When will your donor come again? Tomorrow evening. He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her wrist, where her pulse beat strong. But Elena, the hunger being this close to you, especially now, it's harder than usual to control. Through the bond, she understood. The emotional intimacy had intensified everything, including his most basic need. Then go. Seek your rest. She stepped back, immediately missing his cold presence. We'll continue this tomorrow. This conversation or the kissing. Both, if we're lucky. His smile was heartbreakingly beautiful. If we survive the next 3 days, I'm going to court you properly. Flowers and poetry, and all the outdated romantic gestures I remember from when I was human. I'll hold you to that. Lucian moved toward the door, then paused. Elena, thank you. For what? For not running. For staying when any sane person would flee. For making me believe, for the first time in centuries, that I might not have to face the darkness alone. You don't, Elena said simply. Not anymore. After he left, Elena stood in the study watching the first rays of dawn paint the sky gold and pink. Her throat ached, her hands still shook when she thought about the vampire crumbling to ash. And somewhere out there, an army was preparing to destroy everything, but for the first time in her life, Elena felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Chapter 9. The Quiet Before War. Next evening brought unexpected news. Elena was in the library when Lucian found her. His expression carefully neutral in a way that made her immediately suspicious through the bond. One of Lady Blackwood's children responded, he said, without preamble. Marcus, her second oldest. He wants to meet. Elena set down the book she'd been pretending to read. That's good, isn't it? It's dangerous. Could be a trap. Could be genuine. Lucian moved to the window, staring out at the darkening grounds. He suggested neutral territory, the old chapel at the forest's edge. 1 hour past midnight. Are you going? We're going. If it's legitimate, he'll want to see you. Proof that I'm not just using a human as a pawn. He turned to face her. If it's a trap, I need you there so I can protect you. Very flattering. His lips quirked. You know what I mean. Elena stood, crossing to him. In the day since their kiss, they'd maintained a careful distance, both aware that they were standing on the edge of something that could either save or destroy them. But now, with the new moon tomorrow night, careful distance felt like wasted time. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Through the bond, she felt his immediate response, desire and restraint in equal measure. Before we go, she said quietly, teach me something. About your world. Something that isn't about fighting or survival. Lucian's expression softened. What do you want to know? Everything. But we don't have time for everything. She squeezed his hand. So tell me something true. Something you've never told anyone else. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Finally, he spoke. When I was human, I loved music. Could play the violin passably well, though never brilliantly. After I was turned, I tried to play again. His voice went distant, remembering. But vampire hearing is too acute. Every imperfection, every fraction of a note off key, it was agony. I gave it up. That's heartbreaking. It was practical. I learned to appreciate music differently, listening rather than creating. But there are nights I miss it. Miss the feeling of making something beautiful. He looked at her. You make me want to try again. To risk the imperfection. Elena's throat tightened. I can't carry a tune to save my life, so we'd make a terrible duet. I don't know. I think we'd be perfectly matched, both imperfect, both trying anyway. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Your turn. Tell me something true. I used to pray for something to come and take me away. Some grand adventure or dramatic rescue. She smiled ruefully. Be careful what you wish for, I suppose. Do you regret it? Coming here? Not for a second. She stepped closer, until she could feel the cold radiating from him. Even if we don't survive tomorrow, even if this all ends in ash and blood, I'd still choose this. Choose you. Lucian's control wavered. She felt it through the bond, saw it in the way his eyes darkened. You shouldn't say things like that when we're about to walk into potential danger. Why not? Because it makes me want to forget about strategy and meetings and just. He stopped himself, jaw clenching. Just what? Instead of answering, he pulled her closer and kissed her. Different from the desperate collision of the night before, this was slow, thorough, like he was trying to memorize every detail. His hands framed her face with infinite care, and Elena felt the centuries of loneliness in the way he held her, as if she might disappear if he wasn't careful enough. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. If this is a trap tonight, if something happens to me, you run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to save me. Just run. Lucian, promise me, Elena. The oath will break if I die. You'll be free, unmarked. Lady Blackwood would have no reason to pursue you, and every reason to pursue me for spite. She pulled back to look him in the eyes. I'm not running. We're in this together, remember? Through the bond, she felt his fear, not for himself, but for her. It was touching and infuriating in equal measure. I've existed for 347 years, he said quietly. I've seen empires fall and ages pass. But the thought of you being hurt, of losing you after just finding you, that terrifies me more than final death. Then we make sure neither of us dies. Elena touched his face, feeling the smooth coldness of his skin. We're smarter than they are. We have each other. And we have one advantage Lady Blackwood doesn't expect. What's that? I'm not the delicate human prize she thinks I am. And you're not the isolated, weakened lord she's planned for. Elena smiled, fierce and certain. We're going to surprise her. They traveled to the chapel on foot, moving through the forest in companionable silence. Lucien's hand never left hers, and through the bond, Elena felt his constant awareness monitoring the trees, the shadows, the thousand small sounds of the night. The chapel appeared through the mist like something from a Gothic painting, ancient stone, half-collapsed roof, windows empty of glass. Moonlight filtered through the skeletal structure, creating patterns of light and shadow. A figure waited inside, tall, dark-haired, with the same unnatural stillness all vampires possessed. But his eyes, when they met Elena's, held something she hadn't expected. Hope. Lord Corvallis, Marcus said formally. And the human who's caused such disruption. Marcus. Lucien's voice was carefully neutral. You requested this meeting. Speak your purpose. The vampire's gaze moved between them, lingering on their joined hands. The bond is real then. Not political theater. Very real, Elena answered, before Lucien could. Why does that matter? Because Lady Blackwood believes you're a weakness. A tool she can use to break him. Marcus stepped closer, and Lucien tensed, but the other vampire made no aggressive moves. But I've seen bonded pairs before. They're not weaknesses. They're forces of nature. You didn't come here for philosophy, Lucien said. No, I came because I'm tired. Marcus's voice carried the weight of decades. Tired of serving a sire who rules through cruelty. Tired of watching her turn promising humans into monsters as vicious as herself. Tired of this endless game of territory and dominance. What are you proposing? An alliance. My siblings and I, all 5 of us, will stand down during the attack. We won't fight for her when the new moon comes. Elena's heart leaped, but Lucien's expression remained skeptical. In exchange for what? Freedom. We want you to break our bonds to Lady Blackwood. We know it's possible with her consent or her death. Obviously, she won't consent. The implications settled over them like a shroud. You're asking me to kill your sire. I'm asking you to free us. If that requires her death, Marcus met Lucien's gaze steadily. Then so be it. We'll provide information, leave weaknesses in her defenses, ensure you have the advantage you need. But we can't move against her directly. The sire bond prevents it. Lucien was quiet, calculating. Through the bond, Elena felt him weighing risks, examining angles. How do I know this isn't a trap? He finally asked. You don't. You'll have to trust me. Marcus's smile was bitter. I know what that's worth from a vampire. But consider this. If I wanted to trap you, I could have brought forces with me. Instead, I came alone, into your territory, carrying information that will get me killed if she discovers it. Elena squeezed Lucien's hand. Through the bond, she sent him certainty, trust in her instincts. After a long moment, Lucien nodded. Tell me everything. Marcus began to speak, laying out Lady Blackwood's plans, her forces' positions, the timing of the attack. Elena listened, her mind already turning the information into strategy. They had one night until the new moon, one night to prepare for war, one night before everything changed. Chapter 10. The new moon. Resinked night of the new moon arrived with a natural stillness. As if the world itself held its breath, Elena stood in Lucien's armory, fastening a belt of ashwood stakes around her waist while he checked the silver-tipped crossbow bolts. Through the bond, she felt his controlled focus, centuries of survival instinct sharpening into lethal precision. Marcus confirmed Lady Blackwood will lead the assault personally, Lucien said, loading his own weapons. She wants to watch me fall. That arrogance is our advantage. And his siblings? Positioned throughout her forces as promised. When we give the signal, they'll withdraw, creating gaps in her formation. He looked up at her, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. Elena, if things go wrong they won't, but if they do, you need to know. He crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. These weeks with you have been worth 3 centuries of darkness. Whatever happens tonight, I don't regret a single moment. Elena's throat tightened. You're not dying tonight. Neither of us is. We're going to survive this, and then you're going to court me properly with terrible poetry and outdated romantic gestures." His laugh was soft, almost disbelieving. "You remember that?" "I remember everything." She rose on her toes to kiss him, pouring certainty through the bond. "We're going to win." The first attack came at midnight, just as Marcus had predicted. Dozens of vampires materialized from the forest, moving toward the house in coordinated waves, but Lucian and Elena weren't waiting inside. They'd positioned themselves in the gardens. Using the terrain Marcus had described, the stone fountain that could provide cover, the old oak, whose branches could support weight, the iron gate that could be collapsed to create a choke point. "Now," Lucian said. And Elena lit the first torch. Fire bloomed across the garden perimeter where they'd laid oil-soaked trenches. Not enough to kill vampires, but enough to force them into predictable paths, herding them toward the prepared kill zones. Lady Blackwood's laughter echoed through the chaos. "Clever, Lord Corvallis. But tricks won't save you from numbers." She stood at the forest's edge, a nightmare in human form. Beautiful and terrible, silver hair streaming, eyes burning red with ancient power. Behind her, what remained of her forces regrouped, waiting for her command. Elena felt Marcus and his siblings withdraw through gaps in the formation, exactly as planned. Lady Blackwood didn't notice to focus on Lucian, on the kill she'd waited decades to make. "Your children have abandoned you," Lucian called out. "Look around. Count your forces. Notice anyone missing?" Lady Blackwood's expression shifted confusion, then dawning fury. "Marcus, that ungrateful whelp. They're all gone. All 5 of them." Tired of serving a tyrant, Lucian moved forward, and Elena moved with him, staying at his back. "You ruled through fear, and fear breeds betrayal. I've survived alone for 2 centuries because I never gave anyone that kind of power over me, until her." Lady Blackwood's gaze fixed on Elena with predatory focus. "Such a fragile thing to stake your survival on." "I'm not as fragile as you think," Elena said, raising her crossbow. Lady Blackwood moved with speed that made the earlier vampires look sluggish. One moment she was across the garden, the next she was on them. Lucian met her, and the collision shook the ground. They moved too fast for Elena to track, blurs of motion, inhuman strength colliding with brutal precision. Elena focused on the remaining forces. 3 vampires broke away from the group, trying to flank Lucian while he fought Lady Blackwood. She fired the crossbow, catching the first in the chest. Silver burned, and he screamed. She was already moving, dropping the crossbow and pulling a stake, driving it into the second vampire's heart as he lunged for her. The third grabbed her from behind, fangs bared toward her throat. Then Lucian was there, tearing the vampire away with savage fury. "Don't touch her." He destroyed the vampire with his bare hands, reducing him to ash in seconds, but the distraction cost him. Lady Blackwood's claws raked across his chest, tearing through fabric and flesh. Black blood welled up, and through the bond, Elena felt his pain like a physical blow. "Lucian." She was moving before she thought, placing herself between him and Lady Blackwood. The ancient vampire's laughter was cruel. "How touching. The pet protecting her master." "I'm not a pet," Elena said steadily. "And he's not my master. We're partners." She threw the vial she'd been saving, not holy water this time, but something Lucian had prepared. Concentrated garlic oil mixed with silver shavings. It exploded across Lady Blackwood's face, and the vampire shrieked. Lucian used the opening. He drove forward with an ashwood stake, aiming for her heart. Lady Blackwood was faster than she should have been. She caught his wrist, twisting, and Elena heard bone crack. Through the bond, Lucian's agony flooded her senses. "You can't win," Lady Blackwood hissed. "I've existed for 5 centuries. I've destroyed houses older than yours. You're just a lonely remnant clinging to." Elena drove her own stake up through Lady Blackwood's back. The ancient vampire's eyes went wide with shock. She looked down at the ashwood protruding from her chest, then at Elena. "Impossible," she whispered. "You're just human. I'm human who's tired of being underestimated." Elena twisted the stake. "And I protect what's mine." Lady Blackwood crumbled to ash. 5 centuries of existence, ending in a matter of seconds. Silence fell over the garden. The remaining vampires, those who hadn't fled or been destroyed, stared in horror at the pile of ash that had been their greatest threat. Then, one by one, they ran. Elena stood in the center of the devastation, stake still in her shaking hand, and felt the weight of what she'd done crash over her. She'd killed Lady Blackwood, ended an existence that had spanned half a millennium. Elena, Lucian's voice was rough. He'd collapsed to his knees, his injured arm cradled against his chest. You saved me. We saved each other. She dropped the steak and went to him, examining his wounds with trembling hands. How bad is it? It'll heal. We heal, given time and blood. He looked at her with something like awe. You killed her. A 500-year-old vampire, and you brought her down. She underestimated me. They all do. Through the bond, she felt the moment the sire bonds broke, 5 vampires suddenly freed from centuries of slavery. She felt Marcus's gratitude like an echo, distant but real. It's over, Lucian said softly. Lady Blackwood is dead. Her house will fracture without her. The territories are secure, for now, he agreed. He reached up with his good hand to touch her face. You're covered in ash and blood, and you've never looked more beautiful. Elena laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. You're delirious from blood loss, probably, but also truthful. He pulled her down to kiss her, gentle, despite the carnage surrounding them. You're extraordinary, brave and brilliant and absolutely terrifying. I learned from the best. They stayed there, in the garden until the first hints of pre-dawn gray touched the sky. Mrs. Brennan emerged from the wine cellar with the staff, all of them staring in shock at the destruction and the pile of ash that had been Lady Blackwood. It's done, Lucian told them. The threat is ended. Later, after Lucian had fed from a willing donor to speed his healing, after the house had been surveyed for damage, after the authorities had been carefully misdirected about the wild animal attack that had destroyed the gardens, Elena found herself alone with Lucian in his study. Dawn was coming. He would need to seek his chambers soon. What happens now? She asked. Now, we rebuild, strengthen the house defenses, deal with the political fallout from Lady Blackwood's death. He moved to where she stood by the window. And I court you properly as promised, even though I'm human, and you're a 300-year-old vampire? Especially because of that. You make me want to be better than what I am, more than just a monster surviving in darkness. His expression grew serious. But Elena, I need you to understand what you're choosing. If we continue this, if we become more than allies and friends, you'll be tied to the vampire world forever. There will be dangers, politics, enemies who will see you as my weakness. Let them try. She took his hand. I chose this. I chose you. And I'm not changing my mind. What if I offered you immortality? The chance to stand beside me, not for decades, but for centuries? Elena had known this question would come, had thought about it during the long day while he slept. Ask me again in a year, she said finally. Let me live in your world as I am first. Learn what it truly means to be part of this darkness. And if I still want it, if we still want each other, then we can discuss forever. Lucian smiled, relief and respect mingling in his expression. A year. I can wait a year. You've waited 300. What's one more? He kissed her as the first ray of sunlight touched the horizon, gentle and full of promise. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I've loved you since the first dream, and I'll love you until the last star dies. Elena's heart swelled. I love you too. Even though you're dramatic and ancient and impossible, especially because of that, as the sun rose over Ravencross. Elena stood in a vampire's house and felt, for the first time in her life, completely at home. The darkness had found her, and she had claimed it as her own.